Hello everybody, my name's Ellie and welcome to HT Youth. So we're online, it's a little bit sad, but we're going to make it through. And today we're going to talk about how to save the world. So Greenpeace reckon we have 10 years to save the world. Extinction Rebellion makes that 1 year. And you know what? They're right. This is a critical time for the future of our planet, of the human race, of everything as we know it. But where do we even begin when saving the world? Where do we even start? I want you guys to imagine what you would do if you had 3 years to save the world. 3 years to save the world, what would you do? Let's go. Now, if you're going to save the world, the first place you want to start is with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So in Infinity War, there's this guy called Thanos. This is my drawing of Thanos. I did it myself. I'm very proud. No regrets. And Thanos has a plan to save the world. Unfortunately, this plan involves the destruction of half of all life, or in fact, just the known universe. And this is in order to rid the universe of scarcity and evil. But as the film progresses, it becomes more clear to Thanos that even half of all life isn't enough. The only way to save the world from evil is to destroy all sentient life. And so this huge question is raised. What does it mean to save the world? One more thing. Thanos is actually the bad guy in the story, because then the Avengers turn up and they have a counter theory. They have this idea that life itself is intrinsically valuable, and so you don't save the world by destroying everything in order to destroy all evil. You save the world by wading into the mess and making the mess beautiful. So what does it mean to save the world? Thanos' plan would definitely rid the earth of evil. I mean, there would be no more injustice, there would be no more suffering, but there would also be no more anything. Whereas the Avengers bring forward the idea that actually life is valuable and beautiful, and to save it we have to be a part of it, rather than just trying to control it and grasp it. So how do we save the world? The Avengers are actually thinking along a similar line to Pope Francis. He has this theory that redemption is the way that we save the world, and redemption is what he calls wading into mess and making it beautiful. And it is messy business doing redemption, but that's what we're going to talk about today. Let me tell you about someone who changed the world in 3 years. Now, he never went more than 200 miles from the place where he was born. He never held an office, never wrote a book, never had a family, never even owned a house. He was a general labourer for 30 years, and then in 3 years he changed the world. No revolution, no war, no leader has ever had the same impact that he did in those 3 years. That's right, it's Jesus. Now, although Jesus didn't write a book, we have 4 accounts of his life. And what we find in these accounts isn't just a manifesto for the right way to live. It's not a rule book or a set of wise sayings. What we get is a series of encounters. It's a series of Jesus meeting up with people in the messiness of life and making things beautiful. You see, Jesus was onto something. He got that no economic model is going to stop us from trying to grasp and hoard as much as we can. He got that no new revolution is going to stop us from endlessly jostling to try and be in first place. He got that no war is going to be able to bring us peace. You see, the problem isn't out there, it's in here. There's a book called The Gulag Archipelago, which was written by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, and he wrote it after his awful experience in the gulags, these Russian prisoner of war camps. And he says something incredible in it, which I want to share with you now.
He writes this: "If only there were evil people somewhere insidiously committing evil deeds, and it were necessary only to separate them from the rest of us and destroy them. But the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being. And who is willing to destroy a piece of his own heart? The problem is with our hearts, the core of ourselves. So, how do we save the world?"
You see, when it comes to the heart, human beings are beautifully messy, and sometimes just messy. So what do? How do we save the world? If the problem is in our core, how do we save the world? What does Jesus do? So when Jesus has his 3 years to save the world, he spends them traveling around villages, encountering people. But here's the thing, people who meet Jesus go away somehow changed. They come to Jesus with their deep hurt and somehow are healed, somehow changed, somehow walking a better way. Jesus is radically focused on people. He's focused on people's hearts. And there's several stories that we read where Jesus finds himself in the middle of a crowd and they're spoiling for a fight, and they want to make Jesus the face of their revolution. And Jesus refuses. He's not interested in getting involved in their little politics that they have going on, because he's focused on people's hearts. Now, don't get me wrong here. I'm not saying Jesus isn't interested in politics. Jesus is radical and controversial, and he calls us to justice. But his focus is on our hearts, more than just changing things outside of us. There's a story that I think illustrates this really well, and you can read it in John chapter 4 if you want to, but I'm going to do a little summary of it here. So here is the story.
So there's this woman, and she's like all of us, looking for meaning and purpose and the good life. She's looking to be valuable and chosen. And it's left her with a series of broken relationships. And each time she thinks, this time, maybe this is the one. Except each time the relationship fails, it just leaves her more broken. And now she's got a bad rep because in the honour-shame first century culture she lives in, saving face is important. And she's lost face. And so when she heads out each day to collect water, she doesn't go with all the other women. She goes out alone at midday in the scorching sun because she's ashamed. Except one day she gets to the well and Jesus is there. And he asks her for a drink.
Okay, hold up. So this is big. Jesus isn't just asking her to yeet a water bottle. He is blasting so many social conventions here. For a start, he's in Samaria, in the middle of a politically fraught border war with Israel. Secondly, he's talking to a woman. Now, in the patriarchal culture of the time, women were the possession of either their husband or their father. To talk to a woman was to give her a status that society didn't give her. And third of all, Jesus is asking for a drink. Now, drinking water that a Samaritan woman had got for you, that would mean that you were ceremonially unclean. Yes, COVID-style isolation for Jesus. So he's basically a walking revolution here. But notice, Jesus hasn't gone there to make a point. He's gone there for her. And as they're talking, it becomes clear that he knows all sorts about her. He knows all about her past. He knows all about her present. And he says to her, the life that you're looking for, you're only going to find it in me. And she's kind of like, that's a little bit intense. So she tries to move the conversation away from that by talking about just the local news, a little bit about Samaria, a bit about worship, and of course, how do you save the world? And see, the Jews had done a lot of thinking about saving the world. And over the years, they'd come to the conclusion that, you can't save the world by just wiping out all the humans. So they'd beaten Thanos on that one. And the theory they were working with was that you save the world by being a good person. So They had all sorts of rules and guidelines that they'd come up with to help you live well in a way that looked after the planet, in a way that helped community and culture to thrive, in a way that meant you're going to be living justly and looking out for people who were poor. But their whole plan to save the world centred in on this idea of the Saviour, of the Messiah, who was going to come and who was going to save Israel. And Jesus kind of stops her mid-conversation and he's like, the Saviour that Israel is looking for, it's me. And this mic drop moment is slightly ruined, because then the disciples get back, Jesus' friends arrive back, and they're like, Jesus, why are you talking to a woman? Oh, not again. No, please tell me he didn't drink water. Guys, he drank water. We're in self-isolation for another 2 weeks. Poor disciples. I love this story because of what happens next. There's this huge life change that happens. After Jesus' friends have left, the woman runs back to her village. She runs back to the people who rejected her. And she says, guys, you've got to come and see this. This guy knows everything about me. Come and see him. And so she brings her whole village along with her, and they all meet Jesus. And something changes. The place that was toxic becomes full of life. This woman, her life is changed. The community is changed. And all because they encountered Jesus. And guys, this isn't just a one-off. This happens literally everywhere Jesus goes. So, how do we save the world? Is the solution just to be a better you? To, change your habits, change your heart, change your life? Except, who can change their heart? See, wherever Jesus went, hearts changed. But not enough. It wasn't enough. His 3 years to save the world came down to one day. And he knew this was where it was going. He knew this before he even started. He knew this would be where it would lead him.
It led him to his death. He was executed with criminals for claiming to be the saviour of the world. In Avengers Endgame, in order to save the world, you have to give your most precious thing to get your hands on the Infinity Stone. Except, we are God's most precious thing. Human beings, each one of us. And so, to save the world, he gave himself. Jesus doesn't just claim to be our saviour. He claims to be God with us, God for us, God come to save us. To save us by dying, by sacrificing himself. But it doesn't end there, because when he died, the order of death was somehow itself defeated. And we can be part of this new story of life, his new story of transformation, his new story of wading into the world and making mess beautiful.
I sometimes wonder what happened next to the woman in our story, because we only see her for a really short time. We get a little snapshot of her life. But I wonder what happened the next day when she woke up. Because meeting Jesus changes everything. It changes our actions, it changes our ideas. Maybe meeting Jesus changed the ideas she had about herself. Maybe she thought about herself differently because of him. And rather than feeling ashamed and scared the next morning when she woke up, she instead realised that she was loved and chosen. And so maybe that next morning, she didn't go to the well on her own in the afternoon. Maybe she went with the women in the morning. And maybe as they walked together, they talked about who Jesus was, about what he'd said, about what he'd done. And maybe that changed the whole village. Maybe they heard about Jesus' death and resurrection in the next year, because that was big news in Galilee and Samaria. And maybe they all thought, we met that guy, and what he said has got to be true. You see, when people meet Jesus, it changes everything in our lives. We have to recenter and refocus our lives around Jesus. It changes everything. So, it's up to you guys next. You've encountered Jesus in one way or another. What do you think? What do you say? What will you do?